Stephen Hussey. I am so excited for this episode. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jason. I am very excited to have a chat with you.
Well, I'm going to jump right into a real meaty question that the audience, I'm certain, is going to want to know, because I'm going to air this. It's got to be this month, November. Is it too early to watch Love Actually? Go.
Oh man, in my eyes, it's always too early to watch Love Actually because I have some issues with that movie. My brother and I have made many a joke about that film being British porn for Americans.
Exactly. That's why I jumped straight into the cheesy, typical American question. Next I'll pepper you with Benny Hill questions.
I think it's like the chocolate box version of London, and it's like this tourist postcard version of London with terribly charming stuttering British people all over the place. I've probably done very good for tourism.
Well, it's so funny that you said that, and that's exactly the response I expected. One of my dearest friends, a guy named Matt Wagner, he's in Surrey, and whenever we're actually going to do an episode over our favorite Christmas movies, and one time I mentioned Love Actually to him, and he was like, "That is not a Christmas movie." And even though he's an American, he's an expatriate over there with you guys, he's like, "No." And he has adopted the same sentiment. No, that is not a Christmas movie. He refuses.
And wait, he's English?
No, he's actually American, but he lives. I guess he's lived in Surrey now and I'm probably pronouncing that, so you just have to forgive my East Texas accent. I expect to get out of this conversation with sort of an East Texas Madonna type thing going after visiting with you, Stephen. But I think he's been over there at least 20 years now, and he's raised his two children there, and he plans to stay. I think he gets his Irish citizenship within the next couple of months if he hasn't already. So anyway.
Wow. So what's your view? What's your view on Love Actually? Are you sold on it? Do you enjoy it? Is it a guilty pleasure?
It's a massive guilty pleasure, Stephen Hussey. It's actually, so I have two daughters that are 20 and 21, and my youngest, who is an aspiring writer, by the way, she is going to love this conversation that I'm getting to have with you. She and I, it is the movie we kick off the Christmas season with every year.
Right.
But you have to understand, we are Americans, so we're the people that will watch Christmas Vacation 20 times in the holiday season. So that, I can jump up there with good highbrow entertainment, but I will jump right into the guilty pleasure so fast. And Love Actually, man, I love it. I got to admit.
I mean, I end up seeing it every Christmas,
Yeah.
But I probably have a list of 10 Christmas films I would put before it and happily watch. But to be fair, in England, it's a big deal as well. Lots of people. So I am in the minority here. There's just too many parts that give me is it a cringe factor? I mean, several of the stories are patently absurd.
Yeah.
The Colin Firth falls in love with a woman who he never speaks a word of English to, which and he proposes to her.
Yeah.
A child runs through airport security, which is ill-advised in a post 9/11 world. There's things in there to gripe with.
Well, and I think that over here it was kind of funny when it came out because of the picture it painted. Billy Bob Thornton's president, which I guess was supposed to be some sort of a mock of George W. Bush. That people over here took pleasure in that for some reason. But I think those of us who like it on this side are those of us who have this infatuation with our cousins on the other side of the Atlantic. And in all fairness, this is something that I wanted to bring up to you as well. So I could absolutely care less about my DNA or doing the ancestry.com thing or whatever, but my mother insisted that I do it. She gave all of myself and my siblings, she gave us all the DNA kit. Do you realize, Stephen Hussey, that I have more English DNA, as in from the UK, from somewhere in your part of the world, than the average Brit has?
Really?
I do.
So does that mean were your parents very much fresh arrivals in the US? Were they in the US from way back?
So we go back probably to, I think my brother is kind of the genealogist in the family, and I think he's traced us back somewhere to maybe the 1600s, but before the Revolutionary War for sure. But there's really no like general explanation. Like we weren't. I have no family members that were members of the Society of the Cincinnati or anything like that. But there were some early arrivals, and the DNA stayed from across the pond over, and it just shocked me because honestly, I have a lot of Native Americans around my family, so I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to find out I've got this really cool DNA. No, it's pretty boring. It's just all.
And instead, your results just came back with a picture of the Queen eating a biscuit and Big Ben. Just said, there you go. That's your ancestry.
Exactly. A double decker bus. There you go. Exactly. So there's that. Well, okay. So we got my Love Actually warm up out of the way, and that was kind of perfect. It's exactly the response that I expected, but I feel quite certain whenever my daughter gets home from the University of Colorado, we will be watching Love Actually together in very short order. But
know what I appreciate that a British export is making it over there. I appreciate that we're getting some love somewhere.
Even if it is Love Actually. So, all right, well, let's talk. All right, so let's just jump into this. You and your brother, and here's my train of thought to try to show some cards here. You've done a lot of writing, I've listened to a lot of podcasts on your expertise in relationships, which I have yet to find anything I disagreed with. And as I said before coming on, the show's motto is to improve always in all ways. And so I figure, why not, let's talk some relationship talk. But before that, you and your brother introduced me to what a simp is. I did not know what a simp was. And I asked my daughters after listening to I guess it was your brother's podcast. I don't know. I listened to that, and I asked both Rylan and Abby, I'm like, have you guys ever heard of a simp? And they're like, oh yeah, we know what a simp is. So here's where I want to go with this. Let's start talking about the modern man a little bit, and I'm going to let you define simp, since you guys you kind of unpacked it so well during that podcast. So kind of what is your definition of a simp? And let's talk about that. And then let's get into kind of the modern male and then modern relationships or timeless relationships, as it were. And let's kind of go from there. What is a simp?
Sure. So from my understanding, this is the internet, very much the internet's word. It's probably a very old word. It's like, I'm sure it's like some kind of 1920s insult. Like, this guy's a real simp. But it's been reappropriated for internet culture, and it's kind of this term that's supposed to describe a kind of man. Typically, if you're going with these internet terms, that what they call a beta male, who would fawn over women publicly. He would declare them as goddesses, maybe some one woman he was pining over, or a celebrity he was DMing, or comments on their feed. And it seemed to be a derogatory term for a kind of man who is giving up his self-respect for the attention of a woman, usually non-reciprocated affection. So it's seen as the old cliche of you're in the friend zone, or you're just trying to be a super nice guy, a white knight, as they say, to win her affection. So it's kind of seen as a derogatory, like, she doesn't see you as a worthy sexual candidate, and you are losing your dignity trying to win her.
And the reason why I wanted to tee that up, and as it speaks to, rational thinking, and just, and you're a scholar, you're much more, in touch with not only from, relationships and just from your view. And I've got my own opinions, but I'm interested in yours. Why do you think that males these days are finding themselves so confused that they would almost purposely make themselves the anti-male, that they would make themselves like this you know, so I look, I love the friend zone. I just want to be friends. You're beautiful. You know, I just want to, whatever the case may be. Why do you think that's happening?
Oh, you see, these cultural questions are so hard to disentangle because there's always, you could start listing off 100 potential factors. So it's quite hard to boil these down. Partly, obviously, this is a subset of men, but it's kind of become, in a way, there's just become more people calling people out for it or accusing them of being a simp, sometimes unfairly. Sometimes it's like someone is nice publicly to a woman and someone's like, you're being a simp, buddy. And it's, it becomes this macho posturing over like, I'm the alpha and these are all loser simps. So there is part of this sort of thing where it becomes a macho way of posturing to say there's all these like chumps and I'm not like that. So there's a bit of that. I do think there is are there more guys acting that way now, or has there been some kind of increase in, if you want to say tolerance, or, maybe it's become okay for men to be a bit more vulnerable, or men to be, they don't have to put on the alpha pose so much. So you're seeing more of how some men actually are. Those are open questions. There is also probably on some end more open of more men who are happy playing that like more beta role and are happy to do that, sometimes because it's like a sexual thing and they enjoy that role. Sometimes it's just they are more submissive, or they enjoy, a different paradigm of dominant and submissive. So I think partly it's just that we're in more fluid times and more fluidity is accepted. And so you're going to see more people openly embracing, oh, hey, I don't have to be like traditional 1950s dad male. Actually, I'm more like this kind of guy, or I like nerdy stuff, or I'm more submissive and gentle and whatever. So, that and the critique of that from the very like traditionalist side of the internet is that, this is terrible because we're allowing men to be weaker and they shouldn't be like this, and there's a certain way that a man should behave, or these men are misguided and they're using it as a misguided sexual strategy, and that they don't really want to do it, but they think that's their way to win a woman's affection. So yeah, I think partly, to answer your question, I think partly there's probably just a bit more tolerance, and there's definitely good to that. There's good that we allow more multiple personality types to, be who they are now. And partly probably just more people are like talking about it, and it does create, and another thing is that we are just in confusing transitional times in gender relations. And so there's always going to be these accusations flying forward, like some men are being too old school and masculine and patriarchal, and some men, they say, no, gender relations are changing and they're changing men and women from who they really are. And some, men are going down this road of being incels, or being too, giving up their dignity and self-respect for some attention on Tinder. And so yeah, we're in transitional times, and I think we're trying to figure it out, like what the best way to be is now. And yeah.
So whenever I first heard you guys talk about it, this friend of mine, she's a life coach, and she specializes in women that are suffering from confidence issues. And I asked her if she'd ever heard of the term, and she had. And my question for her was, when you are talking to your female clients, do you tell them that these are somewhat, now I'm married, I am who I am, I don't have, thank God I'm not dating. That would be terrible to be dating in the 21st century, I would think. I mean, those are waters I just don't want to navigate.
A lot of people seem to agree with you.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what I want to, dive into, just for the pure fun of it. Is I told her, I said, do you realize how are you preparing your clients who you're trying to, because her mantra is very much of live your truth and find out who you are and be bold and all of these things, and to which a lot I agree with. Some of it I'm thinking, well, when two truths collide, we got to create our truth that works together, which maybe you and I can talk about that a little bit and just how to make a relationship work. But I said, are you aware, and are you making your clients aware of how confusing these times can be for men? In making sure they don't go overboard to be, while we may have once thought it was being chivalrous or just being a gentleman, now you could be deemed a simp. You go too far. And then you've got the other side, the alpha male. It's really hard to figure out that sweet spot, which I presume is just kind of unique to the other party involved. And which leads me to like this idea that I think I first reached out to you on, which is rational thinking. So in this day and age where objectivity is being pushed to the side for a lot more subjectivity. I'm not saying, I told you we're not going to get political. It's not whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. And I may be wrong. I'll be willing to say, no, Jason, you're wrong. Actually, everything's becoming more black and white defined. You just haven't noticed. Okay, I'm willing to listen to that. But it appears there's much more subjectivity coming into play. How do we maintain a strong sense of rationality in a society that seems to be moving more subjective, where rationality can be a little more challenging? How do you have any thoughts on that?
And by subjective, do you mean in that there's more of a range of roles and expectations, or that things are change a lot? Or
yeah, I think it's more of expectations and the roles as defined by man or woman. And I'll get into this. I just received an email, and I went on YouTube and just kind of addressed it. It was from a large company, it was from Substack actually. And I made the point that what is vile and disgusting to one might be pretty benign to the other. What might be righteous and wonderful to one might be completely off-putting to another. And it seems like there's more and more disagreement on what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is not, what traditionally was, maybe righteous behavior is now considered oppressive behavior. So how is someone that, and I will, consider me your student in this, that someone who just always wants to approach things rationally as well as edifying to the other party, what are the best ways that you found to navigate those waters?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question and super interesting one. I think I try and think of, certain, one rational principle or tool for staying rational. I think of Charlie Munger's mental models. Charlie Munger, great investor. He lives by all these mental models, and he says he goes through life trying to assimilate more and more of them. And because he knows that he's capable of fallible blunders like we all are. And so I do start from the premise that there are just simply things I do not know. I do not try and go into, especially with these big questions of like, the roles of men and women, say, or dating, you've kind of just got to be willing to say, I am an eternal student of this. I'm not. I know some people love to come in with their hard ideology, and this is exactly the way men and women should be and dating should be. I'm just like, dating has changed all the time for decades and centuries, and I don't presume to be arrogant enough to say like we've got it completely right, or we had it completely right 50 years ago, and that's where that's where it all ends. It's like it's always like an ongoing conversation, and that doesn't mean I don't have principles. I have things that I like. I have types of personalities I'm drawn to, as many do. Some people like really super confident, smart, whatever. Some people like people who are much more gentle and sweet and whatever. Like there are just one of the good things about dating now is genuinely that there's probably a lot more range on offer for people in terms of like viva la difference. There's a lot of different types out there. You might be, you know, really into a much more, you know, say even sexually. Some people are into stuff, both men and women. They're into stuff that's much more sexually wild or out there or aggressive or has elements of like dominance and submissive to it. Some people are like, I don't want any part of kink or stuff like that. And I just want to like have an, you know, an old school or a more traditional kind of idea. And this is what I think making love is. And, you know, I don't need to go into all that like, you know, that area. So that to me is all like, that's fine. Like, I don't have an interest in telling, like, I don't have an interest in telling people how they should be in their private lives in that way. You know, I have principles of kindness. I have principles of consideration and respect. And I only want someone who would feel hopefully respected by me. And I want to, like, I believe partners need to be individuals and independent in their relationships to keep some of that interest thriving. And so yeah, like rationally, I tend to think there are certain, you know, and obviously relationship therapists would find there's certain common reasons relationships fail. And you might want to say, you know, to go back to Charlie Munger, he talks about inversing. And part of that is you don't look at like the best that can happen all the time. You look at, well, how are the typical ways people fail here?
Right.
And so that's one thing I think of in relationships more than people like their dream unicorn list. And I want all these things and I expect all these things. And I'm kind of more of the thing of, well, what are the common causes of bad relationships? And it might be, I'm with someone who doesn't match my interest physically and sexually. I'm with someone who we don't even have the same life plan. We don't even have the same view on commitment and marriage. Or I'm with someone who wants to be polyamorous and I'm totally monogamous. I have no interest in that. Or just, we have totally different lifestyles. They want to get some house in the country and live on a farm. And I couldn't think of anything worse than being around animals and grass all day. And I want to be a city dweller and I got no interest. These are the kind of like, you know, I think of like the bedrock things, the fundamentals. And yes, there's this other part on top, which is us negotiating the changing roles of men and women. And, you know, that I see as just all, again, that's not to fudge it, but it's like, it's an ongoing conversation. And some couples do it differently as well. I don't think, again, there has to be like, no, you can't have a marriage where one partner's the breadwinner and one's the stay-at-home, because that's not the new way. Like, that works for some people. Fine. Fine. I don't care. Like, I'm not interested in, like, I don't have a dog in either fight. I'm not bothered about what works for, you know, what works for people. But probably today, one good thing is that the exit costs have slightly gone down of leaving bad relationships. And I think that's probably one thing that was much worse in the past. There were, you know, women who couldn't leave a terrible husband because they were economically totally dependent and had no means of doing anything else or supporting themselves. So it's like, if I leave, I'm out in the rain. What do I do? And so, you know, there are changes that have probably helped people not be just tied to one, you know, one fate forever. But things are going to continue getting different. Like, women are going to get more economic power. All the statistics I've seen, that's going to happen. They may even overtake men. They certainly are in colleges and universities. Yep. I don't know in earning power. That may depend on the kind of jobs men and women like to do more, but earning power is going up and up all the time. These things are going to, there's going to be more and more female breadwinners. These things are happening. And I think you've got to, you know, you can't just bury your head in the sand. It's just like, this is part of how the world's changing. How are you going to deal with it or negotiate it or, you know, assimilate it into your pattern of what relationships should be like?
Well, and I think that, you know, I can say as someone who's married to a very successful business person, an entrepreneur, and someone who is, my wife is, while she might be a tiny 5'3" in stature, she is the strongest woman I've ever met in my life. And so it's kind of remarkable whenever you find that strong woman that it works with. And I love how you said it doesn't matter what people are doing. It's to the individual. And one of the things I heard you talk about that I thought was good is, okay, so let's say you've navigated these waters and you realize things are changing and you do find this person that you match up with. When it comes to maintaining a strong relationship, the ongoing work, I think it was you and your brother that were speaking about how some people look at that as a negative, that we have to work on our relationship continuously. And I think you said something very that really stuck out with me, which was basically, we in relationships tend to wait for these crescendo moments. And if they don't come, then that's a bad thing, as opposed to just these little tiny celebrations. So talk a little bit about that to the listener out there, that they want to improve their relationship and maybe they're waiting for some big fireworks that were there during that first year of marriage. They haven't seen those for a while. How can you get those little celebrations lined up and enjoy the compounding effect of that?
Yeah, well, you are a married man, so you will have more wisdom than me, lived wisdom than me in this. But John Gottman, who I think John and Amy Gottman together run the Gottman Institute, and they have done a lot of studies on this, of showing why frequency in relationships is a really, really big part of it. In terms of, they said a ratio of 5 positive interactions to 1 negative is, I think that was the kind of ideal or threshold, but basically you don't want to slip under that. But and it's okay that there will be differences, there will be disagreements and problems. Of course, that's the nature of living with someone. But you really, I think what they showed is that actually you want more frequent little spikes in your relationship, whether it is a tender moment when you come home, a bit of soothing when one of you is stressed, some kind words, compliments, time spent together at the weekend, whatever, rather than, hey, in 3 months we're going to go on the big trip and that's going to be a huge, like, special moment. And yes, we do tend to remember peak moments looking back quite a bit, like we might remember the great vacation or the marriage or whatever, but your lived day-to-day experience and your happiness in general is going to be a matter of frequency. It doesn't matter if you had a wild, amazing night with each other 4 months ago if it hasn't happened since. Right. It's like, well, my lived experience is many days of feeling like I'm not getting my needs met, or we're not connecting, or we haven't really been sitting and having a conversation. So I don't, it surprises me that people are surprised a relationship would be work. Frankly, friendships are work. Yeah. I mean, most friendships don't survive forever unless you eventually put some legwork in. They do just kind of fizzle out, or if someone stops trying, it becomes apparent and it kind of dies a death, or they need, like, you need to breathe life into friendship. So I don't think we get out of that. I suppose the romanticism idea would be that somehow we achieve some spiritually perfect union and the lightning bolt hits and we fall in love, the credits roll, and we did it. We met the great person, and that's game, set, and match.
Yeah, and you're right. So that's one of the things I think that, probably the major thing that makes my relationship work so well with Jimlin is that we celebrate small victories, and when we create. I was reading. I took a. I was going to tell you about this because when you were talking this spring, I can't remember. Well, I guess it was on the Generally Speaking podcast. You were talking about taking the writing class. I was going to tell you that Harvard has these Edx courses that I have really fallen in love with. It's the open courseware, so you don't have to. You can pay if you want the. I think your doctorate from Oxford is probably good enough. But if you need a few more certificates to hang up on your wall, you can actually pay for it. But you can take these courses, and one that I took for at no charge was on Chinese philosophy.
Mm.
And and that it was a bunch of Confucius's theories and writings, or philosophy, if you will. And one of the things that was a recurring theme in this course was create the importance of ritual, and how rituals create space for positive routines to then take hold. That a ritual is a place where you behave in a way you otherwise may not. It's like, okay, like a funeral. They bring up a funeral. Okay, a funeral is a place where a bunch of people, a bunch of family members that otherwise might be at each other's throat will come and be civil for a day because they're at the funeral. They're paying respects. And so I think, Jimlin and I have made like Friday morning coffee. It's a ritual, but it provides space for us to have that special moment that I think if she were here and I were to ask her, would you take our Friday morning coffees if they had to go away, but we got one more trip to France, that would be amazing. But if at the sacrifice of all those coffees and just that time together to talk in that space, and it's sacred, it's little bitty things. And so I think that's why, because I could relate to it so well, if I were to put my relationship under a microscope and go, why does this work so well? Because not patting myself on the back, patting Jimlin as well. In fact, it's a great relationship, man. And that's what we do, is we find these little moments throughout every day, every week, that we cherish, and we make them almost like not a ritual. So it's like, oh, okay, well, it's the time where we have to do this. No, it's like, no, we have this thing it's a time we hold sacred for just a little bitty victory as a couple, that I think compounded are the reasons why we rarely fight, we rarely argue, and we have a very happy friendship and relationship. And so when you and your brother were talking about that, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool to know that you actually have, you're doing something right. That's kind of what I took from that. All right,
That's
so
awesome.
so
I love hearing like you have that, like making space, like you
yeah,
say, in a relationship, creating. It's not always about filling it with more stuff. Sometimes it's like we have, that's our time on a Sunday morning for whatever comes up in those 2 hours, or sitting and reading the paper together and maybe talking, maybe not. Like those are special, just creating the space together where you can both not be focused on anything else.
absolutely. And I think that this is kind of not so much a relationship issue, but kind of going back to where all this started, the UK versus American way of life, if you will. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen this with in particular, watching my friend Matt that's lived over there for so long. I think that because, and I'm not downing America. I mean, I love the USA. So please, listener, don't think I'm doing that. But we get distracted more easily, and because of it is a very commercial place, right? I think, and you, like, what does your day look like? You see, it seems like there's a more I don't want to, maybe it's just finding a more profound joy in simpler things like reading, learning, good conversation, like I hope we're having, those sorts of things. That in America, we're constantly grabbing for something, trying to find a temporary happy. And I think I'm thankful that I figured out that, give me a good book, and I'm American, so it's a cup of coffee, not tea, and I'm pretty happy. To me, I find great riches in that. What would you say to someone who's seeking that more simplified life of joy versus the temporary happy, and be it in a relationship where you're looking for the big, but I think that goes over to other people's lives, right? They think, I've got to have something big, like the brand new car, the brand new house, and that's what's going to set me right. But really, it's just these little bitty joys along the way. At least that's what's worked for me. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, man. Oh, that's so it's so interesting. I think a lot about this because this is quite honestly, this is one of my personal struggles, is trying to enjoy the things I'm doing along the way. And I am someone who's come from a family of, my dad is an entrepreneur. He's always worked very, very hard as long as I've been a kid. He is someone who his work is a lot of his life, most of his life. And that was very much a hard work ethic was passed down to my brothers and I. So we've always been very ambitious, very strong work ethic. And I think the challenge, as we've spent 10 years growing a company and, getting some successes and things, has been to say, like, we need to make sure we're enjoying this and taking moments and celebrating things. And we've gotten better at it over the years. We've definitely like done things where we have a big win as a company and we go and like celebrate, or we've had fun trips after our retreats. We do retreats in the US. My brother lives in the US, so we're like all go to like Vegas or somewhere in California and have blast. And those are really special moments when you kind of drink it in a bit and you just like, let's enjoy where we are for a bit and not always be looking for the next win. Try like, are we going to grow to this next year? Are we going to like do this? Because after doing that for a while, you definitely realize, unless you're super lucky, companies go through phases and it's not just like growth. So if you live for that every year, you're going to have some years where you're just going to feel frustrated all the time because not everything just infinitely grows. There's different chapters and phases. And I'm trying to have a bit more appreciation of that as I get older and appreciate that not every phase of life has to be this, like, I'm just aggressively pushing all the time. Like maybe periods of expansion and contraction, or I took in 2019 before the world changed, let's say, and borders were locked and whatnot. I went on a big trip at the end of the year. I took a couple of months off the company entirely and went to Asia and just went to some countries I'd wanted to see and dived in and just kind of meandered around a little, exploring places I wanted to go, Vietnam, Korea, Taiwan, and different places, Japan. And it was just a blast. And it was just so, I was like, I need this. This is a kind of growth, if you still want to tie back to growth. It still is, but it's not the me chasing another shiny coin growth. I'm like, this is actually a part of myself that needs feeding deeply as well, which is, I am someone who loves learning. I love sponging everything I can from interesting cultures and places. And I want to feel my boots on the ground there. I don't just want to read about them in books. Sometimes I want to feel it and get involved and taste the food. And, these are the more you read literature, you realize as well, these are just as important parts of life as well, like drinking it in. And that's part of what the experience is. And I try and even think about in my day to day, not just in trips, but how can I make what I'm doing somewhat more joyful? How can I I live in London. Why haven't I gone I love art. Why haven't I gone to an art gallery in a month when I've got some of the best art in the world on my doorstep and it's right there. And some people would dream of being in London and having this. Why haven't I been in a month? And it's like, because I'm just on the grind. I'm just on the treadmill and I'm not kind of thinking holistically about my life. I'm just chasing another next shiny coin. So it's your thing about America versus UK. It's a weird thing because the UK I see as, you are right. America, I work with a lot of Americans. They are very driven. The work ethic is really high in America. Everyone notices that when you work with Americans. You're like, these guys don't take many vacations and they work a lot, long hours. And, Europeans always feel lazy compared to Americans, which is why I'm bullish on the US still, probably not so much on Europe. But I think in a way, UK straddles between America and Europe and mainland Europe, where the Europeans would see us a bit like you, like the mainland Europe. Maybe the Spanish, Italians would see the UK as a bit like America, but to America, we're more European. So I feel like the UK has the capitalist elements and a bit of the mainland Europe. Maybe we like to chill out a bit more, but mainland Europe seems very slow paced, even compared to the UK. So, but I think there's things to be learned from that slower pace sometimes and drinking it in more.
I agree. And that's, you touched on so much there that is what I've discovered. And, one of the things I didn't even mention before we got on, and you asked me, so why the podcast? How did this start? And for me, like, there's no ambition tied to this. Essentially, this is the payoff. Getting to have this conversation with you is the payday. And I mean that in that I will get to, and we also talked about production. So I once had a producer, now I do not. Very rarely do people take the time to feel how wonderful, how beautiful it is to create something. And that doesn't mean that this is going to be a Joe Rogan episode or Tim Ferriss. I'm not into that. Those are not my competition. My only competition is me, and the fun is the creation. And I think that's one of the things that, by God's grace, I've realized that just being able to build something, to create something, that in and of itself can be so rewarding. And then you're talking about literature. So two authors that kind of reminded me, that I thought of when you said that, obviously, Thoreau, and then whenever when John Steinbeck had become so famous that he thought he had lost touch with the people that he wrote about, the average American. That's whenever he bought a big camper, attached it to a truck, loaded up his dog Charlie, and he went out to journey and explore America as best he could, an unknown person, just putting his boots on the ground and soaking up the culture that was the country he had written about, that he felt so famous and so detached from. And then Travels with Charlie in Search of America. It's one of my favorite Steinbeck books. And then another one that what's kind of come to me of late, as far as getting this concept, is one of your fellow Oxford alum, is C.S. Lewis's book, Surprised by Joy. Have you by chance read that?
Years ago, my dad had that on his shelf, and I think I read the Screw Tape Letters, and I think maybe my dad had Mere Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read a few of them, but yeah, my dad was a big C.S. Lewis guy.
So Surprised by Joy, I once had struggled with this as an adult, because I could not find joy as an adult. I mean, I'm 46 now, and I guess it was through my 30s, man. I was a chaser. I was just constantly chasing political ladders, business ladders, entrepreneurship. And I remember, as silly as it sounds, I came to a point in my life where, when I was really young, we used to take trips to Colorado, and I would see the mountains, and they were majestic, man. I mean, they would take my breath away. There was nothing like it. It was just this inner elation that nothing else compared to. And then as an adult, I lost that. And I would go to Colorado thinking, all right, where's the joy? Where's the happy? I'm going to go see some mountains. And I'd be like, crap, am I depressed? Is something wrong? And in C.S. Lewis's book, Surprised by Joy, I finally got it, Stephen. It's that you cannot pursue joy for joy's sake. You have to pursue something with all your heart that you really love, and all of a sudden joy will sneak up on you. Joy is just a byproduct of doing something you really love, and being in situations that you kind of create the space for, and then all of a sudden you'll find yourself full of joy. And it has nothing to do with seeking out the money or whatever. I last week, I still have a lot of business deals thrown at me, and I had a buddy of mine. He goes, we could make a lot of money at this. I go, I'm too lazy for that. I'll give you some great guys that would make excellent investors, but no, I'd rather read a book. So I what you're saying, it's so cool to hear you say that, and that's how, now this is the next dot I would like to connect, is let's talk about writing. What is that? What your ultimate joy is, as far as the doing of your life? Is it writing? Is it speaking? I love the dynamic you have with your brother, by the way. I think that you guys make such a cool team. And I don't say this as false flattery or anything. I have no reason other than to say that I don't think one would be as good without the other. You guys really have a cool chemistry. It's really fun to watch you guys interact, and to think that you guys get to run a business together and do the cool things. And yeah, he's in LA, right? Am I correct about that?
That's right. Yeah.
So, London to LA, that doesn't suck. Those are pretty cool places. Yeah. And you're getting to do it with family, someone you trust. But like, getting that kind of exposure, what really drives you now, as far as just kind of a joyful existence, that maybe the listener that's out there right now chasing the dollars? I guarantee you a lot of these listeners are sitting in $1 million homes. They've got, the Lamborghini in the garage or whatever. They're in Aspen, for a month of the year, maybe 3, and they're freaking miserable. So what kind of is that driver for you now? What are you seeking in keeping that balance? Again, like we talked about before we got on, when we do this 2 years from now, what will the conversation be like? If I were to ask you, Stephen Hussey, are you full of joy, man? And if so, what does it look like?
Well, first off, may I say you have an intimidatingly successful audience who are all kicking back in their houses in Aspen with the Lamborghinis in the garage.
Yeah, well, maybe that's just a bit of a manifestation as well there too, Stephen. I don't know what they all look like.
Yeah, it's this is part of like what this is what I'm always trying to learn. And I feel that if you are learning, hopefully, let's say spiritually, by which I mean your happiness or the health of your spirit, as opposed to just physical or wealth, it is this case of refinement. And I feel like epiphanies come in waves. They come in. I don't know, you don't have like one grand thing that completely changes the course of your life. Maybe certain individuals do, but I tend to get these things click over time, and some lessons I have to learn a few times and it really clicks. And, some I'm sure I'm yet to learn. And, I'm not, I'm not obscenely wealthy. But if I knew at 19, even just this, like I moved to London, I work with my brother in this company, and we get to, do a podcast together and people watch it, and we have a big YouTube channel with a couple of million subscribers. And, that would have seemed so like a cushy, sweet setup. And I would have thought, man, if I just had that and got my own, lived in my own apartment in London, stuff like that, man, I'd be like, I'd never have a bad day. That would have been what I'd think. And of course, you get to those things and you're like, oh, well, things are better. Things are better, but I still, it doesn't go away. Those feelings of sometimes emptiness, loneliness. Oh, I don't know if I feel creatively fulfilled. You go through waves with your work where you're loving it, or it feels like it sucks, or that didn't do well. We put loads of work into that video. Oh, this sucks. And you have a terrible day because you did a video that didn't do well. But it's in the scheme of things, you've achieved a bunch of things you did want to achieve. But so it's a weird thing. And I still, like anyone, that I still if you leverage your skills to make money, more power to you. Great. We're all trying to take care of ourselves and get security, and financial security is a worthy goal in my mind, especially if you've had financial insecurity, which I have. So I know I don't ever belittle that as a goal. I think I'm trying to think of the second part of your question. In terms of injecting joy, I think I have to very consciously think about, creatively say. Mm-hmm. I sometimes realize, what, I am doing all this stuff, but just doing more stuff doesn't mean you're creatively nourished or fulfilled. Right. And so that's why sometimes I've realized you've gotta, it's not just about working harder. It's about being better at listening to that voice inside of you that is maybe screaming at you, maybe whispering at you that, man, you really want to do this. This is something that you want to pursue. And maybe you're a bit scared right now. Maybe you've never taken that risk before. Maybe you're afraid you're not going to do it as well as you think you could. But that voice, what I've noticed is that you can't really ignore it. If you ignore it, it's not to be too dramatic, but a part of you dies.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've just got to the point where I've been like, this voice has been there too long and it's been nagging me, and it doesn't matter what success I get in other areas, this is still in my heart. It says there's something else you can do right now. And writing has been something that since I think I discovered, I've always been a big reader. I was fortunate enough to skip a year of school when I was about 6 years old because of my reading ability. And so I've always read, but I wasn't into serious literature. And that happened more in the late teens. And I think when that happened, something clicked, and it got very excited about the idea of writing and expressing myself that way. And my cousin first gave me some Hemingway short stories and Fitzgerald and all these American greats, and I was kind of plunging in. And then I discovered, loads of the classic British literature, and then onto like European stuff, and just all over the place, and classics and Greeks and whatever. And it was like this, wow, I have some affinity with these are my people, like literary people. I love talking about literature. I love reading these like great, Russians from hundreds of years ago who are saying these things that still connect with me and feel as fresh as ever today. And, that was like definitely an awakening of something inside me that has never left, which is the desire to be able to express, like you talk about joy. The joy sometimes is literally sitting and writing a paragraph, and you can write a bunch of terrible paragraphs, but when you hit and when it feels like you nailed it, and no one even has to see it, but the feeling for yourself there is a nourishment that is very hard to explain to other people. But it's something that is like, oh, this needs to happen whether or not this becomes successful or publishing. Like writing is not a great money making scheme. Writing is not, if your aim is just success, writing probably isn't the path you'd choose. You choose 100 other things before you choose that. But sometimes something just calls you, and you just feel like this feels like the way I need to get this out of me. And I recently started a YouTube channel of my own because I had that bug again. I was like, I love making videos with my brother. I have a blast doing it. I love diving into psychology of relationships, and dating is endlessly fascinating to me. And I was just like, but there's other stuff I also want to share. I read this stuff and I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about rationality and things that have helped me. And it's just, I don't know where that's going to go, but it's like this. I know something in me feels nourished when I make a video or when I write another chapter of a book I'm working on.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you. I mean, that's because we share that, in that, the writing in particular, you're right. You don't decide, I'm going to make $1 million. I know what I'll do. I'll become the next Hemingway. Now, some people mistakenly do that, and they're usually very frustrated as a result thereof. But you said something on one of your podcasts that I actually kind of repeated this morning on a quick Instagram video, which was that it's as if you feel that calling, just to get started, to try, to do and muddle your way through it and figure out. I think this was your point in the message that I heard. It was on, and again, it was on another episode, I think, of Generally Speaking, which was, it's okay. The only way you're going to figure out the things that you're not good at is to try to just to get started and start doing something. If you have a business that you want to start, you better get started. And along the way, you'll find those things where the resistance hits you. And that's the thing you can focus on fixing it. But until you get started and at least try to do that thing, well, you're just gonna be dead in the water waiting for that perfect moment till everything. If you think you're gonna really grease the skids and just fly through your first novel or something like that, that will probably never happen. And then, that's what happened for me on my first. I never desired to write fiction. I didn't think, and maybe it's part of it. Speaking of Russian, I'm reading Crime and Punishment for the first time, and wow, phenomenal. Still want to tackle some Tolstoy, but I'm not there yet. It's kind of like War and Peace sits, but sits beside Infinite Jest, as far as not Russian, but just the big fat books that you want to dive into. Starting to read better books, and then finally getting lost in them, there was something in that made me realize, fiction's a lot of fun, because when you're writing nonfiction, like the first book I told you that I had published, well, then you have to be really credible, and everything has to kind of add up, obviously, to give yourself credibility. And it's going to be, you can make it fun when you say it in your own language, but man, writing a fictional story, you can do anything you want. And there's something that for me anyway, when that clicked, that I had a character, Stephen, show up in this book that I'm going to, God willing, have published next year. I had a character show up, and I'm sitting there writing, and I go, "Oh my God, is this?" And I'm not going to tell the listener, because I never reveal who the character is, but it's a historical character that's in this novel that I wrote. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the fun you can have. And if no one ever read the book, just being able to have moments like that, that is the reward, right? Is having those epiphanies to where you're telling a story, and it's your own story. And man, not to mention the benefit to our mind that is. That, to me, that's the greatest benefit of creation, is that the dopamine hit you get, and the things that you benefit from mentally, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
right?
that thing of making something from nothing is a form of magic that human beings are capable of, and it is mind-blowing, really. And that feeling I get of when I've written anything, non-fiction and fiction, I've written programs and online books and all these things, but there's something about just seeing that and being like, at some point that was all in me, and now it's there, and it's like my structured thoughts, beautifully laid out, but it's like somehow that was all locked in.
Yeah.
And so why not get it out and see what's on the table? And it took me so long. I've been still learning this, really. I mean, I'm on my own like writing journey, but with fiction, I had so many blocks for many years of, I had half abandoned novels and things like this, and would never finish things. And I was so judgmental of myself all the time, the whole way.
Sure.
And maybe it's because I got good grades in school when I worked hard, and I was used to doing hard work, getting a pat on the back. And, if you do this, you get an A, and it's very simple. And, with this, sometimes it's like with a piece of art, it's a more qualitative experience. There's humility of just, you've got to learn your craft. You don't get to just do your homework and get an A+. You might have to, this might be a decades, years long refinement of a craft, which is what you're doing. And there's so many moving pieces: dialogue, character, story. How does a scene work? Like, you have to read all these novels to absorb what makes a scene have tension, and why do people keep reading? How will this not get boring? All these things like have to be learned as micro skills. But there's something in the, I learned I've got to stop being so judgmental all the time. I realized as a creative, I was just super hard on myself all the time.
Yeah.
And I've got to trust my subconscious a little more, that it understands some deep intuition of what I'm doing, where this is going. And just trust that, okay, the work that comes out on the page the first time is not the final work. That is the first part of the work, and you can make something better as many times as you want. But with writing, it's amazing because you don't have, oh, the sound guy screwed it up. Oh, the director messed up my vision. Oh, that actor said the lines wrong. The good thing about writing is like no one else gets a say. You go write your book over there, do whatever you want, but no one gets to say, here, this is entirely me. And there's something so, as someone who, has that individualist streak, I love that, I get total control in that way.
Have you read Bird by Bird by chance?
Sure. Love Bird by Bird. Yeah. Anne Lamott is amazing.
So one of the things that she wrote in there, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I sure could, is that writers and creatives, like I don't know about you, but I don't like to go to social gatherings. I'm like I think I'm an extrovert in hiding. Like if people watch this and they know that I create, and I'll get in front of a camera, I will get in front of a large audience and speak. But the beautiful thing about writing is that you get to show up in a lot of places, but you don't actually have to be there. And I think that's what
Yeah.
she said. That's the beauty of being an author. And you get to create this world of your own making. That I was the same way, man. I was so judgmental until all of a sudden, and Brian Scott has a great book called The Reality Revolution, where he talks a lot about intuition and listening to intuition. And then when you learn that there's more neuroreceptors in our stomach than in our brain, well, that means that gut feeling, that means something's going on. And I think you just said something that's very important for this audience to hear. And it doesn't have to be writing. If there's something in your heart of hearts, your gut, whatever it is, telling you that this is something you should do, just trying it doesn't mean that you have to even finish it. But at least and if it's the right thing, there's something that's it's like a gravitational pull. It will pull you along and keep you going, and you will not be able to like now. It's hard for me, with the exception of it. I'm sure you've read The War of Art, which is the resistance is real. And
Yeah.
I think mostly the resistance is I'm so afraid to sit down and write crap, that I read it and go, this is crap. This is just terrible. This is, but like Seth Godin says, when you have writer's block, the first thing he asks anybody that says to him, I've got writer's block, he said, well, show me your bad writing. And most people can't, because they don't
Yeah.
get past the resistance, right, to sit down and do the bad writing. And just starting to just get the flow going. There's something about the brain that it will follow. So I like what you said there about just getting something going. And it sounds like you've kind of you've found the drug that is just get started, and boom, you kind of get addicted to the process and to the storytelling. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I definitely get out of rhythm with writing at times, and have to get myself back there. But I what I am better at doing now is if I suddenly commit, like I have a friend and we write together, we kind of give each other pages, and once we commit, I do just show up and do that. And now I'm better at just like, okay, we're doing this. We're just doing this. I'm sitting down doing it. There's no like, giving myself an excuse. And so I'm much better at that. The general practice I try and do now, and I do slip up because consistency is really difficult, but I try and make myself just like, am I producing output this week? What have I produced? Okay, I got a great podcast out with my brother, great, tick. Or I did a YouTube channel video for my channel, great, tick. Or I did write 5 pages on that like novel I'm working on, great, tick. And I tried to not be so hard on myself that absolutely everything has to be on all cylinders at all times. But I'm like, okay, if I'm creating stuff and putting stuff out there, the wheels are turning. And as long as I'm finishing things and shipping them, as Seth Godin would say, then we're doing the basics right. We're getting stuff out, we're producing things. And, like you say, that's when you only doing that you start seeing opportunities, or you start seeing ways you can be better next time. In the abstract, everything is so difficult to judge. It's so difficult to judge you as an entrepreneur, a writer, a podcaster. I'm sure lots of people think they can make a great podcast, but try making 50 episodes of a podcast. And, you really have to be willing to go through and then face the pain sometimes of like, man, those first couple of episodes sounded bad. Like that wasn't good. And you've got to go through that. I was playing a lot of chess over the pandemic, and I'm not a good chess player, but I do enjoy it. And chess just teaches you that you are always making blunders. You are even if you think you've improved this much, there's always like things you can be doing better. There's always a level your game is not at. And it kind of does teach you that it's okay. You are making, there's all these opportunities to blunder, but you've just got to kind of focus on, I'm going to work on that part of my game today. I'm going to learn about how to move my bishops better so that I don't get forked, or I'm going to learn about pawn structure a bit more. And once you break it down more, you know, it's not just the game of chess is intimidating. It's like, well, let's just focus on better pawn movements and not falling for that trap this time and doing that better. And I try and think about that with, you know, video making is intimidating to me, and having to first shoot and edit and all the things you have to think about when you first start making videos. The sound, you can't believe how much is there, but it's just, you know, oh, I got a better mic this time. I know how to get the lighting better. Okay, great. I learned a little editing trick today. And so I give myself little rewards, little hits of dopamine and pat on the back. I'm very kind to myself. If I am moving and doing things, I try and just be kind to myself and say, like, that you don't have to hit home runs all the time. If you're doing it and showing up, you're winning.
That's well said. And I go through the exact same thing. Like today, before you got on, asking you to record your own track of an MP3 file so that I would have really clear audio on your end. I just learned that this week. I mean, it's because, you know, and that was like a huge win. And I think it's also hard and we do have a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience, or aspiring entrepreneurs or creatives. And, you know, one of the things that I have learned the hard way, just what you said, is that you better find those small victories, because it's very lonely whenever there's no one giving you a check for every little move you make. There's not a regular check for those videos. You just have to go, hope you came up with a good idea and create something and let that dopamine hit take you to the next one and learn something from it and continually strive. Talking about the podcast, a friend of mine, he said that he did the research. He's much more analytical than I am. I just kind of go. And before he started his podcast, he had like 5 recorded before he would launch once. James Quandall, we met through the James Altucher show just by happenstance, and me putting myself out there. And he said that of all the podcasts that are out there, this will blow your mind if the statistic is true, and I think I have it right. Only less than 10% of the podcasts that are out there have more than 100 episodes. Isn't that crazy? Right. I mean, it's so isn't that insane? Yeah. And so it's like, yes, it's easy to go buy an H6 recorder and get a Blurberry or whatever, you know, syndicator you want and get a podcast out, but to show up every single week and create and keep and reach out to people like Stephen Hussey, that well accomplished. You guys are doing great things, that could easily say, yeah, no, who are you? And that's why before we came on, I said, I'm still to this day, I don't care how many episodes in, how many downloads, I'm so grateful and thankful that people that I admire enough to bring onto the show that I want to learn from will go, sure, I will do that. It just, and so again, I'm grateful to you for doing it. And that becomes the victory. This conversation, this podcast that we have created, this friendship that I hope that, you know, I'm not a transactional guy. That's one of the things about me. You know, I'm not transactional. I'm a relational guy, and I always want to pay it back. And so if you tell me, Jason, I need you to do this, I need you to pump this video out, I am all in, you know, and that's the reward. And you have to put yourself in those situations. And I think that's one of the things that is fun about being a creative. It's just, you got to show up every day. And like you said, just yes, like Seth Godin says, just ship something, just get something out the door. And it's remarkable. So, yeah.
It's so true. And the next level becomes like trying to make it a fun process that becomes addictive in and of itself. Because it's like, the first bit really does feel like the grind sometimes. It's like, God, that's so hard. Like when you first put out your first video or whatever on YouTube, it's everyone at first feels like such a mountain to climb. And I'm trying to get to this point where, and I think I have this with my brother's podcast with me, where we've been doing it a bit. Well, we mix between, we work hard on it, but you know, we try and like, it's like, this has to also be a fun experience for us, where we're in that, like the most creative stage, whatever mood you can be in, is like a playful, relaxed one. Yeah. And I remember Bill Murray talking about this once, of all people, but you know, Bill Murray just has this essence, right, where he seems like the most low-key, effortless guy on earth who just seems to pour out, it just looks like it's all just so relaxed. And when you see him on interviews, apparently he doesn't even have a manager. He just has a mobile phone and that's it. And, it's like, but he did talk about how important relaxing is, and being able to be in that state when it's very hard to like turn on the funny or turn on the something if you're like clenched and tight and scared. And that fear, what's that June line? Fear is the mind killer. It's like, you are tight and you don't have your most interesting thoughts, but your most interesting, probably funny self is probably when you're on a couch chilled with friends, you're in front of the TV, you're making jokes, you're laughing, you're talking. And that's the kind of state where it's like, can I get there when I want to create stuff?
Yeah.
That's kind of the challenge I set myself, is like, can I get to that loose, relaxed me at my most, what I consider most interesting or thoughtful, talkative?
And it's also, I think, as part of that is to realize that life doesn't have to be so damn serious all the time. Have fun. My wife, I told you we have a retail business. And so a big part of our business has become me making a complete clown of myself on our Instagram. And like yesterday, we started opening on Sundays through the holidays, as we do every year. And I did like this Broadway musical type video. And she's like, and the best is she plays straight to my just complete buffoonish behavior. And we will do we have a videographer that comes in and does so many more highly produced videos every month. And the night before or on the way to the store, every time we're going to do a shoot, she'll say, okay, so what are we going to do? And I'm like, you'll find out when we get there. It's just leave some room for spontaneity and fun. And I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk that once said, and it stuck with me, document, don't create. Yes, you have to have a format sometimes. Sometimes there's a place for a lot of structure. But people, I think that's why podcasts are so popular, is this is just people listening into you and I having a conversation. There's no set agenda, and I think it's just, and we're just documenting a conversation between, two guys, as opposed to that just formal creation that does create the tension. So I got to ask you, there's two things I want to ask you. And I know that, and please, I want to respect your time, but I told you I've been looking forward to this conversation with you. I'm pulling every bit of Stephen Hussey I can out of that big brain of yours.
I'm here for it, so I appreciate it.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to know kind of what you enjoy writing, what kind of the stories that you like to read, as well as the stories you like to tell. And then you can't really see it because, again, talking about obsessing over things, I've been trying to obsess over my setup and what it looks like in the background. And today I just said, no, it's just going to be right here. This is what today's setup looks like. But I'm building my library. So I want to know the stories you like to read, the stories you like to tell. And then for someone who's building a library, and again, I know depends on people's taste, but I think you and I are pretty like-minded. I think we probably like a lot of the same things. I want you to tell me kind of what you would start building the library with. So
yeah, well, I like to read. I go on kicks. I think I go on kicks of certain genres or types of literature that I want to cover, and sometimes I'm plugging gaps where I feel like, oh, I haven't read anything contemporary in ages, and I will really seek out, 5 really big contemporary fiction books right now in literary fiction and kind of read them. And sometimes I'll just say, you know what, I haven't read any like say like The Great Russians, right? It was like, I haven't read like these people like Chekhov or Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. So I will go on certain sort of quests to plug what I feel are gaps in my knowledge, and I try and let that be very curiosity led. There's a great quote by do you know Naval Ravikant?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Sure. And he's obviously known for a lot of wise pronouncements, but he said this line, read what you love until you love to read. And
wise.
It's, it is, I think passion is always, such an important thing. I as much as weird as I'm a big rationalist in lots of ways and believe in a lot of systematic thinking and avoiding biases and things. And then I know that there is a role for deep intuition in your bigger direction sometimes. And maybe rationality becomes the filter for like, is this a stupidly risky decision? How do I think about this in a smart way? And rationality becomes the filter, or rationality becomes monitoring the success, what's doing well, what's not, that sort of thing. But when it's in, my reading is quite intuition led. Now that happens that my tastes do go towards some of the big literary, I love literature that tackles massive themes. And I do love, even when it's a bit heavy handed, like, if it is like a Moby Dick or a Shakespeare or just things that take on the big tragic themes and man's search for meaning, or people's struggling with their own like tragic flaws, or great battles of the world and sort of things like that. But I definitely like some of those grand things, but like one of my favorite books, full stop, is Ulysses by James Joyce. And that is almost comically, it's grandiose in style, but it's only about a single day in Dublin with two guys, guy called Leopold Bloom, who works as an advertising salesman, and his friend Stephen, who's a bit more intellectual and dreamy. And it's like you are seeing everything about being human, the struggles, the humiliations, the flaws, the little indignities, the little successes, their weird lustful behaviors, and all these things, that the violence, you're seeing it all contained in a single day. And this is like, there's something unbelievably beautiful to unpacking the, like, look at everything that happens to a person in a short space of time, like the richness of being a human. And so yeah, but you get someone like Gatsby or people like that, and it's like they're taking on these big themes of the American dream and the chase for the love that's a dream and is a fantasy, but it's a flawed fantasy. I do like these things. So yeah, but when I write, I tend to actually write a lot about, it's funny, I actually currently write about very contemporary relationships. I guess that's where my work is, so I guess I'm inspired a lot by that. But at the moment, I write a lot about small things that happen, in someone's like progression to, coming of age stories excite me, or, what it means to be alive now in the time we're in. And I think there's just a lot of great fodder. And so I actually am drawn very much right now to the contemporary and the things. And I'm not saying like, I'm not interested in writing some novel about Trump and things like that, but I'm not interested in like, oh, I'm doing a political whatever novel. I'm more interested in just the experience of being a human in the digital age and all the things that come with that, the challenges and negotiations. That's interesting to me right now.
Well, there's so many caricatures flying around right now. It's a real, there's so much material. Now you have to be careful not to get yourself in trouble these days with doing satire or just even commentary on it. But I think it is one of the most fascinating times of the human experience. I mean, it's the only one I know, but gosh, I've read my history, and it's an amazing time to be alive. But yeah, to write on some of these, the changes and the seriousness for which people take themselves these days, that in and of itself could make for a great book. I've got one that I tell you what, I'm going to test a short story on you. It'll take like 30, it won't take long at all to give you the theme. I think you'll really enjoy it. All right. So this guy wakes up and he's pissed off because his wife has made him late. And this guy, the title is The Narcissist. I should probably let you know. The title is The Narcissist, short story. So this guy, he gets up and he's pissed because his wife has made him late. And this guy plans his day to a T. He's listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast. He's read Atomic Habits 3 times. I mean, he is a type A, Ryan Holiday, Seth Godin student of all peak performers, right? So now his schedule has been disrupted. He gets in the car and he's going to a train station, and he gets there and he gets on the train. He goes to the restroom where he's happy because the mirror faces the toilet, which gives him a little extra time. It's a small space, and he's able to check the wrinkles on his forehead, make sure he's aging properly. Then he gets up to wash his hands because after all, this gives him more time in the mirror. And oh, by the way, there's a global pandemic going on. And he's been told that washing his hands is important. So that's secondary to him getting to check out his face a little longer. Well, he sits across from this guy on the train and they have a conversation the entire way. Eventually, he gets to his destination. He gets off the train, and the friend that's there to meet him at the station to pick him up walks up to him, and he sees him wave at the guy that was sitting across from him for the entire ride. And his friend waves as well. And he says to the guy that's the main character in the story, he says, "Oh," he says, "do you know him?" He said, "Yeah, great guy. Just had the best conversation with him on the ride over." And his friend says, "Do you sign?" He said, no, I don't sign." He said, "That guy's deaf." And so the guy he's so full of himself. He's been talking the entire time. So obviously there's a lot of fill in there, but those to me, I like to, and I can relate. I mean, I'm the guy that's trying to always optimize for perfect health. And I have as much fun making fun of myself through things like that as anything. And so I think that just having that as an outlet is it's a lot of fun. So
well, that's the most fun of, the cool thing about literature. I heard W.H. Auden say that great art, I might be paraphrasing, but he said great art is clear thinking about mixed emotions.
There you go.
And it's when you can frame, it's fun through literature to work out. I think that's where we work out the ambiguities of being a human and the contradictions and the secret embarrassments, because like you say, maybe like personal development likes to simplify things or make life seem very like, this box is this, you be productive, you be healthy. And literature kind of teaches you, but life is also just really goddamn messy.
It is.
And there's tragic elements, but there are joyful, little strange, joyful things, but there's all these like mixed things, and you feel contradictory things. And that's the meat to explore about the human condition.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I love about, like, I never appreciated Hemingway till recently. I do talking about just a reason to create. That's why I started my Vitruvian book review that's on my YouTube channel. I read a book a week and I review it on the channel just so I'll have, it holds me accountable and I get to talk about it so I learn it better. And I got on a Hemingway kick it was funny. So my daughter, I told her I was about to read The Old Man and the Sea. And she goes, "Oh," my youngest daughter, who's a pretty voracious reader. So she goes, "Oh God, The Old Man and the Sea." She said, that's one of those books that will tease a kid. It'll lure a kid in because it's so short to grab it for a book report. And then they start to read it and they're like, what's going on here? Because they haven't, I think you have to live a certain number of years to appreciate the boy's kindness, the homeless or the poor man, the poor fisherman, what it means to him, the struggle, the fight that he has, what that was just to maintain his life. And there's so much that you have to be on this earth long enough to appreciate a story like that. And so I started analyzing Hemingway because I didn't remember a damn thing from whenever I was a kid. And we learned about Hemingway, and you learn about his ability to, in such a simple, clear way, describe so accurately the human condition. Like Steinbeck, I love his dialogue. It reminds me of Joel and Ethan Coen and their screenplays. I love the dialogue. That's Steinbeck. I love the words he put in his character's mouth and the turns of phrase and that sort of thing. Hemingway is just very blunt and plain, but man, and that's a book that will always stick out with me because of what you said. To feel, and like in the same thing with like Moby Dick, to feel, you feel that book. I mean, I remember whenever I could put myself in that little hotel room whenever they were first having it, when Queequeg, they're having to stay in that bed and him setting up his little shrine. I'm like, I could see that. I understood what that meant. And when that starts to happen, it's really, it's kind of intoxicating. And so I like those grandiose things. Maybe it's just because I have to feel a book. And once it grabs me like that and I feel it, then I'm like, all right, I'm in. I'm not trying to, change the world. Don't try to change my mind about something necessarily, but if I can feel the human condition,
Yeah, and it's like you understand, I'm not a fisherman and I've never been whaling,
Right.
but I understand, some part of me understands the deranged quest those people are on, even if I think this
Yep.
crazy on
Yep.
paper.
Yeah.
But it's like I understand
Yeah.
the deranged desire to see this through.
Absolutely, because it's like an Old Man in the Sea in particular. I had been on a hiking trip, a mission trip in China that it took me to. I mean, it can be experiences like that can be metaphors for so many things, and then also to again go back to understanding. And it kind of, not to be cynical, but I remember thinking after I read The Old Man in the Sea again here recently and talking about contemporary times, I was like, it's hard for me to imagine a kid that age being that sweet and kind and understanding to such a senior person in this day and age as that boy was, to understand what it meant for that man to offer to make him dinner, knowing full well he had nothing to cook, but the little boy wouldn't let on that he knew the old man had nothing to cook him for dinner. It just little things like that just are really cool.
There's bits like that in Cormac McCarthy as well, like when
yes,
at the end of No Country for Old Men, when Tommy Lee Jones tells the story about his dad, like waiting for him in the dark, and he says like all the dark and all the cold, and he's like, he has a dream about his dad who's died a long time ago, and it's just moments like that are just like it's a lot to take, because you can just feel those, in the difficulty and darkness of the world, those moments of like paternal love or light or something.
Well, and like The Road, talking about Cormac McCarthy. I mean, I'm the most, if you would have told me that a post-apocalyptic novel would have moved me the way that one did, and to feel that, but I mean, that book, I always described it, and that was one of the very first book reviews I did on my channel. It just like, and it's so funny. I think I described this when I watched No Country for Old Men for the first time. It was in a hotel room in Austin, and I sat there with this sense of anticipation the whole time. It just drug me along, and there was no stopping. And it was the same thing with The Road. I had to see, there was always something lurking around every corner. And sometimes there was something, most times there wasn't. Didn't matter. Your stomach stayed really tense the entire way. And then the end, you're just like, oh dear Lord, the pain. And it was just, so yes, excellent. So, well, all right, Stephen Hussey, I could sit here and talk with you all night. I do hope we'll do this again. I know that I told you this was casual, it's unformatted. There were so many things I wanted to cover with you, because you are a writer, you're an entrepreneur, you're intellectual. I think that you want a great, I love to see talented people and give them ideas that I think would shape them. I think the approachable intellect would be, or the approachable intellectual would be a great newsletter for you to add to your arsenal. You're so kind.
That's a cool title.
Well, I think you fit it, man. I mean, you are, and it's I don't know. I'm usually pretty good at, once I hone in on someone's craft, going, that's someone that I would really like to spend some time with. And this is you've definitely proven me right today, my man.
Thank you, man. I truly, honestly appreciate your kindness. And since you reached out, like, you've been so welcoming and, easy to talk to. And that's how I knew I wanted to come and talk to you, because I could feel your authenticity from, just the brief contact we had at first. And yeah, it's like, oh, check this guy out. But I was like, no, he's coming from a good place. He's like real. He's, that's what I look for in people. And yeah, just speaking of authenticity, like, your authenticity and curiosity shines through in this, and that you wanted me to come on means the world, man. So I appreciate it. And I will relay to my brother what you said about our dynamic on the podcast, because speaking of being relaxed and loose, it seems to be a thing that people do enjoy, the chemistry there. And that's something that's like one of the lessons we've talked about today is like, oh, the bits where you're having fun and loosening up are the bits that people appreciate.
It is.
Yeah,
And there's a genuine, just brotherly Because I don't know, there's just something cool about that. There's a cool dynamic between brothers getting to do what you guys are doing, and you do it well. It's awesome. I love it.
Well, you're a great conversationalist and interviewer, sir. And if you want any other book recommendations, give me a shout, and we'll help fill up your library. I'll give your readers one thing if they're interested in literature. There's a great, anything. Harold Bloom was one of the great literary critics of all time. Died a couple of years ago. Just an amazing scholar and one of the true. He may become one of the few people left who seem to have read everything, he did an amazing compilation of the whole Western canon that you can still find online. If you search Harold Bloom Western canon, but, he kind of what he considers the masterworks of all Western literature. But even his book, if you want a shorter version, his book, How to Read and Why, has some really great, it's more him going through what he considers some masterpiece novels. There's right up to present day, or, there's Cormac McCarthy, Thomas Pynchon, and these, Don DeLillo, but then there's like, what's good from the Greeks and the Russians and whatever, all kinds of art everywhere. So he's just been great for guiding me to some of those great classics, and helping me find my way there.
I'm ordering it as soon as we get off. And I think you mentioned it in, I think you had a YouTube video on how to read more books, I think was the title of it. And I think you might've mentioned it there, and I meant to order it and I did not. So now that you've told me twice, in person and in recorded version, I'm going to actually order that book. Before we go, I have to give you the opportunity to tell everyone how they can find you, how they can consume your incredible content, and anything else you would like to share with the Jason Wright Show audience, man.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Stephen H. Hussey, or my YouTube channel is just my name, Stephen Hussey, or on Twitter at Stephen H. Hussey. So any of those. Or if you want to hear about relationships and love life stuff, you can go check out my podcast with my brother. That's called Love Life with Matthew Hussey. If you search Matthew Hussey podcast, you'll probably find it. But that's where we talk about, current issues around relationships and dating.
Fantastic. All right. Well, sit tight, Stephen. I'm going to do a little sign off here, and then I'll stop all the recording and say goodbye appropriately. If you are watching this on the YouTube channel, thank you so much for joining Stephen Hussey and I today on the Jason Wright Show. And I want to encourage you to please, if you would, consider subscribing to the Vitruvian letter. You can find that at jasonwrightnow.com. As always, leave us, if you don't mind, please leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. That really helps the podcast to climb, and that way more people can hear from not just me, but the wonderful guests that I have on here, like Stephen. And with that, thank you so much for joining us. And please remember always to endeavor to improve, always. I'm out. Thanks.